Hello and welcome to the Gifted Podcast. I am your host, Niraj Mulani, and in the Gifted Podcast, I speak with elite athletes as we try to challenge the misconception that athletes are just some people who are talented or gifted with special abilities at birth. Every week, I am joined by an elite athlete as we try to break down what it truly takes and means to be an athlete. If you're an aspiring athlete or just a casual sports fan, you will definitely enjoy this podcast as I get candid with athletes about their journey, their achievements, moments of heartbreak, and most importantly, moments of hard work and perseverance. Today, I'm honored to welcome an Olympic and world champion in rowing, Lindsay Shoop. Lindsay has an Olympic gold medal, 3 gold medals at the World Championships, and 5 medals, 2 of them gold, at the World Cups. Lindsay was part of a team that won the first American rowing gold in 24 years and the only gold at the full 2000 meter distance. She's also an author of a book called Better Great Than Never. From almost running away from her first rowing training session to winning gold at the Beijing Olympics, we discuss it all in today's episode. So let's get to it. Welcome, Lindsay, to the Gifted Podcast today. We're really excited to have you today and learn more about your journey to becoming the Olympic gold medalist and having a successful career as you do. So let's start right at the beginning. And I'm really keen to know, what are the foundations that you believe contributed to you becoming a very successful athlete? Things that you did as a child that you think really helped you become the athlete that you were?
Yeah, it's funny because there were lots of things, good and bad, when you're a kid growing up in the country, bumping around, with your older brother and predominantly male friends, simply because there weren't that many girls my age that lived nearby, where I lived in the country. So I spent a lot of time with the boys in the yard and playing backyard games and things like that. And so being a little bit tall for my age too helped me kind of keep up with them as we kind of invented games as we went along. And it was really a badge of honor to be able to keep up with them. And I remember a couple of our friends that were particularly strong and fast while I was growing up. I thought, man, they are so fast. Look how athletic they are, and by virtue of that kind of pulls you along with them. And, again, because of my size, played a lot of different sports. Didn't enter those sports because of some natural innate gift. It was more out of necessity, which I talk a little bit about in the book, is that I nearly drowned in a lake when I was 2. So, survival is swimming. So that was kind of where it all started. And after that, I rode horses. I played, basketball, baseball, field hockey, soccer, volleyball. It's just a whole slew of sports. And so, having those influences as a kid, they helped free up time for my parents, but they also gave me that outlet of exercise, learning how to compromise and work with and fight, with other people. I fought with my older brother a lot. So all of those small things really were influences growing up that, of course, at the time I had no idea what was going on, but reflecting on that, realized how important the people around me really were. And I don't know if it was an inborn thing or if it was because of all the teams I was on when I was young, but my joy in being around other people and being a part of something, and that's what sports were the outlet for, is that I got to work with other people. I got to spend time with other people. And that, I think, is one of the skills. That is definitely a skill that to this day, really helped me excel all the way through the elite level. Rowing is a team sport. So if you are a really great teammate and can communicate and learn through that whole process, you're going to go much farther with it.
While you kept playing various different sports all the way to college, you didn't really think you were gifted, and that's a taboo word here on our podcast, to pursue a pro career and walked away from sports altogether. How did you navigate this phase of your life?
The way that I look at it is the things that we do are the things that we do, not who we are, and the things that we do happen to be the ways that we can demonstrate who we are and become better at being ourselves. And sports were those outlets for me. And so my whole childhood growing up with them, I didn't think that I had anything special. And like you said, I in fact thought, oh, I'm good for this environment, but I'm not good enough to play in college, because it was just a heightened challenge that I thought was just a little out of my reach, just a little too far for what I thought I could ever be capable of. And so when I did walk away from sports, I kind of lost the most common outlet in my life. I didn't realize, like I mentioned before, I didn't realize what they were doing for me. And so having walked away, it gave me that time to lose my outlet for expressing my best version of myself. So my grades dropped and I withdraw a bit socially, and I gained about 30 pounds. Those were not the best versions of me. But when I discovered rowing at age 20, it allowed me to then very methodically, one day at a time, get a little bit better at being me. So it wasn't that I had a natural gift. I mean, shoot, when I started rowing, I couldn't run a mile without stopping to walk. A few years later, went to the Olympic Games. So that wasn't a gift. It was, the decision to get a little better each day. That ultimately the byproduct was the Olympic Games.
And at this time, so like you mentioned, 2.5 years of being in college, and at 20 years of age is when you found rowing, or should we say rowing found you. Talk me through this life-changing moment of rowing finding you, because I've read about this a little on how you almost ran out of the training the very first day. So I'd want to know more here.
Yeah, the night before I bumped into the head coach of the University of Virginia rowing team. I'd actually woken up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep because I had all these thoughts in my head of what I wished I had done differently in my life, but that I thought it was too late. I didn't make the decision before now, and shoot, I was only 20 years old at the time, so clearly it was not too late. But for picking up a new sport, it does seem kind of late, let alone picking up that sport and then going to the Olympics with it. That's very rare. So when I woke up in the middle of the night and I wished to myself, gosh, I wish I had done things differently. I even said, the world will never know. And that includes me. I might have been something had I done this sooner. Well, lo and behold, the very next day I bumped into the college rowing coach and he suggested, hey, try rowing. And at the time, it was the right moment where I was like, wow, this is a sign. This is a serendipitous moment. I'll do that because this gaining weight, dropping grades, not hanging out with my friends is not the best version of me. So let's do that. Anything is better than what I was doing. So then that was a decision. 17-year-old insecure me coming out of high school would have never said yes. So I said yes at that moment. But by the time that the first day of actual rowing practice happened, I showed up at the gym. I worked my way back in through this meandering maze of hallways and doors. And I stop right before I walk into the gym and finally make that decision of, okay, I'm officially at practice, because I could see through this vertical glass in the door all the people that were there. And when I saw them, it was funny. Some friends of mine and I were just talking about this yesterday. When I saw them, I thought, my gosh, these women are tall. They're strong. They all know each other. What am I thinking? I'm out of my league. And so I turned around and tried to run back to the safety of my car. And on my way out, 2 girls on the team said, oh, you're here for practice. Practice is this way. And they kind of corralled me and took me with them. So I was like caught red-handed trying to escape on my first day. Here, I had made that decision to say, sure, I'll show up. And then I thought, oh my God, why? So I'm thankful that they might have been running a little late for practice. That was another serendipitous moment. Thank goodness they were there, because who knows where I might be today had they not helped me make my final decision to show up.
Yeah, and a life-changing moment that almost didn't happen. So
another life-changing moment that almost didn't happen. There are more serendipitous moments of that first day and that first decision in the book, but I'll let you read them. I don't want to spoil them for you.
And I had read that And this is also brought up in our previous conversation where you mentioned that the aimless path of the first couple of years in college and you wanting to break through that. And that's why you looked at rowing as an opportunity to transform yourself. What about rowing as a sport made you think that this probably could be it, the sport that could allow you to transform yourself and possibly a pathway to greatness?
Rowing was different. It was complete. I knew nothing about it. My parents knew nothing about it. There weren't teams for, high school athletes at the time. There are a couple now, but I mean, it was not a thing where I grew up. In fact, I didn't even tell my family that I was going to join the team. I just said, I'm going to start doing this thing, because it wasn't about them. It was about me. And I was just going to try this thing. And the sport itself, more than any, I mean, I played almost a dozen sports growing up. And rowing was the sport out of all of those sports that allowed me to methodically, gradually, at my own pace, get better. Yes, you're comparing yourself against other people, but because it's a non-contact sport, it's not a points ball sport, it is literally how much better can I get can I push myself a little bit more today? Can I get a little bit stronger? Can I sleep a little bit better? There were all of these very controllable elements that I could learn about little by little as long as I paid attention to those elements. It's interesting because I've now thought, I actually made a little note on my wall one day to do some research about this, is it made me wonder if one of the keys to being really great at sports is memory and the willingness to track things. And I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed tracking and keeping journals and logs. And my memory, combining those factors, allowed me to truly see all of the minute details that really did matter. And not just the ERC score or the height or the speed running up the hill. It was all of the small things that allowed me to excel.
And within a year of you starting the sport, and like you mentioned, you had no experience about the sport, but within the very first year of starting the sport, you went to the pre-elite national camp, and there as well, you started at the bottom of the barrel of all the people there. And you spent the first few months at the bottom, but you kept showing up and kept doing what the coaches asked you to do. And it took you 3 months to hear your first good job from the coaches. What sort of intrinsic or extrinsic motivations did you rely on to drive you through these tough months?
My teammates, first of all, I entered the training center, when I first started training full-time, so after college, when I entered the training center, it was a small group of people. And so we got to create that environment. We got to create the personality of the team. And it just so happened that I entered the training center with a friend of mine from college who I had met on the rowing team in college, and then another friend who I had met at a pre-elite camp. And we were just kooky, goofy people. We didn't know any better. We were all pretty new to the sport. All three of us had learned how to row in college, but we loved it. We had played other sports growing up. We were tall women. And one of my favorite ways to describe us is that we were naive optimists. We played practical jokes on one another. We, made light of something that could have been pretty just wretchedly boring, first of all, and just tedious and mind-numbing to a certain extent because of how repetitive it can be. But savoring those moments of levity made it so fun to explore and learn and get better. And, in time, especially you're outside, it's an outdoor sport, you're on the water, taking the time to, even when life was busy, rushing from practice to work to practice to bed and, living on a shoestring with not a lot of resources at your disposal, but figuring out a way to make it work because you love it. And then even between all those rushes, getting on the water at the end of the day and savoring how beautiful it was and how quiet it was and how different it was, because that's where you chose to be, and those were the things that I would say I relied on most, because rowing, typically you have a few coaches for a lot of people. So you get used to not getting a lot of feedback from your coaches. But when you do, you know it matters. And so you really do learn from yourself and your teammates the most.
Right. And like you mentioned, it also depends on the individual's ability to learn and retain the information, especially in a team sport where you need to, keep driving yourself and pulling your own.
Yeah. I mean, so you learn there might be some element that the collective, that the whole group is working on, but you also need to remember what your individual things are, even if the coaches aren't giving you that feedback every day. It's like, okay, I was told to do this one thing with my thumb 3 weeks ago, so I better do that, even though the rest of the group is maybe working on these other things. I need to do that and these. And that's where I wonder if the memory isn't a piece of it, just being able to identify that A, that small thing is important, and B, to care, to keep that small thing as part of your routine.
Right. And in fact, this brings me to a very interesting topic that I often try and understand from athletes that are in team sports. So I read, and you'd also mentioned that the first few training sessions were all about cleaning the boat, organizing your stuff, talking to your teammates and getting to know them, and then eventually rowing for only 20 minutes. What is the process of cultivating and nurturing an intangible but extremely important trait of teamwork within an individual, especially in a sport like rowing?
Starting with where we did, like to speak specifically to this example that you're using of our first day of practice, even outside the sport, it made sure, and our coach setting up that situation, I don't know if it just was kind of, oh, we needed to clean the boathouse and get organized. Maybe it was as simple as that. Maybe it was just like, well, this needs to happen today. Or, he may be very intentionally, and this is what I suppose in the book, is that he did it very intentionally because we needed to take care of each other and our stuff. And we needed to understand that it wasn't going to happen really fast and that there were a lot of small elements that mattered. And so it taught us to pay attention to those small things. It was like, oh, if he thinks this is important, then it must be important. And so something as simple as sweeping the boathouse was an important piece of being a good teammate and being a good athlete, that our coach was there with us, cleaning and climbing and doing all of the things. He didn't just say that it was important, he demonstrated that it was important, and that was how my college coach was too. He was there with us doing a lot of the things. So it truly, they lived what they said, and, truth be told, you never know what it actually takes and what it will take you to get where you want to go. So when you're leveling up to the higher levels, you look for those tiny little incremental things that might make the difference. And as long as you have the time to do them and you fold them into your training, you are kind of taking care of all the things that might matter in the long run. So over the whole picture, and this is where writing the book became a really fun exploration, is that I went, okay, these are all of the things that happened, or at least the highlights of the types of things that happened. And I can't help but think that they all mattered in what we did. If they didn't, then you could just cookie cut our training plan and perform it and win. And that's how it would work, But I still, as an athlete and as a coach, firmly believe in the X factor, that all things made equal among two different groups, there are unmeasurable things like innate connection and teamwork. And through that levity, even the practical jokes that we played on one another, that matter, that help you jump off the page because they allow you to embrace the training more than you might otherwise.
And this teamwork is actually something that is so important. It started showing early in your career that within 4 years of you starting the sport, you won a bronze medal at the World Cup in 2005. And that opened the floodgates for gold medals. So gold medal in World Championships 2006 and 7, gold medals in World Cup 2007 and 8. We often hear that winning one gold medal is difficult enough, but doing it consistently for a period of 3 to 4 years is a true hallmark of an individual as well as a team. What would be the biggest factor behind this sustained period of success, according to you?
Longevity, and this is something that I love talking about. And this is why I am where I am today. And I love that you're asking this question, because it's like, why did I write the book now? And why did it get informed why did it build out to the way that it did? That I firmly believe that there are so many things that we can do to take care of ourselves beyond. All of the recovery allows you to sustain. And when I say recovery, I don't just mean sleep. And I don't just mean the way you're eating and the way that you're thinking, but that there's the social element of the support. And that's where, when you are able to truly enjoy what you're doing, because even on the bad days, when you're stepping in puddles and your knuckles are bleeding, like from the cold and cracked hands, when you can truly embrace that, because it's allowing you to be better. It's not just about the external factor. It's about you as a human being developing and learning. And I've found that continual growth and development and learning stays interesting over time, because it's never the same. It never allows it to get old, and I really do, during that time where I really was in, leading up to the first Olympics that I was training for, the group of athletes that I was so fortunate to be immersed with, there was an overarching positive sensibility. We all took care of ourselves individually, but we really did, default to positive, especially when we were together. And having that be the overarching kind of culture allowed it to be sustainable, because it kept it fun, it kept building us up, and it, kept it light. That's a phrase that we use in rowing, is to keep it light, because the boat goes faster when you keep it light. So, and keeping it light is like lighthearted, so you keep it light in the boat and out, and that helps you go fast.
One of the factors supporting the longevity is something that you touched upon earlier, is your habit of tracking things, of journaling and keeping a track of all the things that you could keep a control over, all the variables and all the things that you couldn't keep a control over. But what it does is it helps the individual understand how they're improving, even if they aren't improving compared to others, but to themselves. At least it shows improvement, and that allows the individual to keep going and keep showing up like you did. And that's something that I have actually learned from you, from our previous conversation, and something that I've adopted as a practice. So I definitely put a very high value in keeping a track of all the variables, whether they are in your control or not.
Yeah, because then you don't, there's no way to miss anything, and the neat thing about tracking, and whether, your training logs and your journals, the thoughts that you're having. So even put your mood in there, and we had talked about that before, because that is your body giving you feedback. Your heart rate gives you feedback, but so does how did you wake up? Did you wake up on the right side of the bed this morning? And that might go, oh, maybe I should or shouldn't have, maybe I should have gone to bed a little sooner, or maybe I should have had this for dinner instead of that. How did I sleep? And so you can really pick up on these little nuances of what you're doing and tweak them over time. And so you get better at the actual tracking part. What do I need to track? Have I tried? Okay, let's try this. Let's add this piece to it. So it becomes fun. In and of itself, it becomes a practice.
Yeah. And a big factor of the overall process itself. And when we hear people talk about trusting the process, these are really the things, the habits that they want to keep following, even if they don't see immediate returns, but everything put in one time together, they'll be able to see the differences.
Yeah. And I apply those to life. When people in recent history, especially after about a decade of coaching now, people have started more specifically asking, okay, because now, the landscape of rowing is changing. And so, okay, we know all of this stuff, all of these things, but is the boat going that much faster? Or people, what are the changes? What was helping then that allowed you to excel there, even though you didn't have all of these resources or gadgets at that time? And, a big piece of it is to look back and go, what did I actually do? Because people assume that you take supplements, had a strict nutrition plan designed just for you, that you did we didn't have those resources. And so to go back through all the training logs and all the notes, I'm like, nope, I'm not wrong. We met with a nutritionist maybe 2 or 3 times the entire time that I rode, And so to keep it simple, and so instead of overcomplicating what you're doing, your body is so smart, so intuitive. Eat well. And what that means is you paying attention to how your body is responding to whatever you're eating. Right? So write that down. Don't try and remember it. Keep that story in your head. There's too much going on in there. Write it down. And then you have proof that, this thing or that thing did or didn't work, and that it's not more complicated. The nice thing about tracking is that every body is different. Not just everybody, every single one of us, every single physical body is different. So you're going to respond a little bit differently, even if everybody's given this particular plan. So the beauty of having all of that is that it was that I slept a lot, I hydrated well, I ate well, and I took care of myself physically from a recovery standpoint. So those basic elements that were critical to me thriving at the elite, at the Olympic level, I aim to apply to life so that I can thrive as a human being outside of sport as well.
And in fact, coming to the Olympics and having dominated the sport leading up to Beijing Olympics, I'm sure the target there also was the gold medal. But how do you train, especially mentally, for such an enigmatic sports competition like the Olympics? And how do you keep the complacency from creeping in, considering that you have been dominating the sports for so long?
In the grand scheme of the Olympics, we actually hadn't dominated for that long. To the outsider, it might seem like a long time, but for us, there were other people that we raced against that had been winning the games for a decade, more than a decade, so multiple Olympic gold medals, and so for us to step into it, we were the underdogs. It didn't seem like it in the years leading up to it. It boded well for us. It showed us progress toward this, getting better every day. Can we get a little better now? Okay, we did that. Cool. Can we get a little better now? Here's for instance, there was a team that was notorious for winning the games. And in 2006, when we set the world record, we'd beaten them by somewhere around 13 seconds, which is a lot in rowing. That's a lot. And then 1 year later, they had cut our 13-second margin to a second, somewhere right around a second. So if they stayed on that, if the trajectory were linear, they would have eclipsed everyone at the games. And so that's their increase in speed in that period of time was like, oh, shoot, yes, obviously we need to keep going. Right? We squeaked it out by the skin of our teeth the year before the games compared to the previous year. So we knew that because everyone was chasing, that we didn't want them to pass us. So we didn't train staring at them. We trained toward things that no one had ever done before. So that allowed us to not focus on anything else except what we were doing. This has never been done before by anyone. We aren't staring at anyone else to make this happen. We are staring off into the distance and then looking back at what we can do every single day, which was practice. And when you make the chunks manageable like that, that's the psychological part too. You are physically making the chunks manageable. And so you're biting things off, which allow you to grow mentally too. Your confidence grows as a result of the preparation that you're putting in one manageable chunk at a time. I love that you said enigmatic about the Olympics, because you never understand what that means. I don't know that we as human beings are meant to understand things that are that big, which makes it so special.
Yeah. And all the more challenging, but yearning for the individual to train for such a competition.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, reflecting, and again, people say, did you know what was going on at the time? Reflecting and writing the book has allowed me to go, it was about getting better every day. And that called the Olympics a byproduct of that a couple of times, or once at least before, where had we looked at it as like, oh, we want to beat someone else, that would have limited us. It would have made us only as good as whatever that thing in the past had been. And so when you turn it internal and you can connect it so meaningfully, because at the end of the day, not that we're selfish, but we're kind of innately like survival, ourselves is what we're at. Human instinct is that's our natural human instinct. And so when you can tie what you're doing to helping you grow, that allows you to whatever that outlet is that, like I mentioned before, that allows you to pour more into that. And if you think about it, in order to be really wonderful and great for someone else, to be a part of something that is a greater whole that is meant to be great, you have to first be good for yourself, because you won't have the tools at your disposal to be that best version of you for someone else. It's weird to phrase it without it sounding selfish, but by making yourself the best version of you possible, you are helping someone else do the same thing. You're giving them the most positive energy that you can.
Yeah, very counterintuitive, but so true. And going into the final race at the Olympics, how were you feeling? And could you talk me through your final race?
You can read it in the book. No, yeah. And this is fun too, because I have these vivid memories, and really getting to refine writing about this, honestly, during the height of the pandemic, allowed me to sit at my desk for hours on end and focus and put myself and imagine myself in those moments that are so vividly held in my mind. And not only that, look back at the words that I wrote. There are very specific lines in the book that I include as quotes, and those quotes are either quotes that I remember or quotes that I wrote down verbatim that we had. And that's why those are quite accurate, the conversations that were actually had. But sitting at the start line, we all make assumptions about athletes, about anyone that performs at the highest level. And everybody, we're human, we all have doubt. And you cannot prepare yourself for all the doubt. You can do your best to prepare yourself for as much of it as you possibly can, to be as confident as you possibly can be. But you never know how your body is naturally going to respond when you enter a situation, a challenge, whatever it is that you care about. And the more you care about it, the more likely it is that you're going to get nervous, no matter how prepared you are. And sitting at the start line, we went through our routine, and that is something, having a routine from the moment that you wake up, to the moment that you're done with the race, is having it down to the pinky nail, is going to allow you to stay focused on just, okay, I'm managing this process. And that's going to help your mind stay off of the nerves that might otherwise build. You fill it with things that you can do something about, rather than rampant thoughts of what might happen. Well, I'm going to, make sure that I'm brushing my teeth, sleeping well, stretching. My body is as prepared as it can be. My mind is as prepared as it can be. So that when you sit there and you do have that moment of, holy crap, this is the biggest challenge I've ever faced in my entire life. This is going to hurt a lot. It's going to be really hard. I'm going to feel terrible in about 5 minutes. Actually, not even in 5 minutes, in about 45 seconds, I'm going to feel terrible. But you sit there and then you have that moment and then you go, yeah, because I made the decision 1,000,000 times, because I've taken millions of strokes and I've woken up on thousands of days and gone to at least 2 or 3 times that many practices and said, yeah, this is what I want. And I've gone through all of these things, but right now I'm so rested and so prepared because of that. So then you can take a deep breath and then you just let it flow. Then you don't think about anything. There are literally no thoughts in your mind.
And like you mentioned, you are trying to follow a routine and keep your mind out of it so that there is less decision fatigue. And it's something that's usually used in sports psychology, the monkey mind, and wanting to keep it out of the way and letting your body do the thing. While you are rowing, what kind of things may pop up in your head, apart from the actual body focusing on the task at hand? But what are those interactions with the mind that are happening?
Yeah. I've never heard anyone call them interactions before, and they are 100% interactions. I say that there's like little man number 1 and little man number 2. You have 2 people sitting on your shoulders, and one is going, yes, and the other one wants to break in there and tell you no. And that's the conversation that you're having in your head the whole time. And mostly on the days when you're training, and you definitely have these conversations. I speak to myself in the third person. I don't say, yes, I can, or yes, you can, or Shoop. I said, yeah, Shoop. I say my name to myself as if I'm coaching myself through this thing. And something that, again, like tracking, getting better at training logs, you get better at your mental game too through the challenges that you've had. And it starts methodically at first, where you take manageable chunks, and then you eventually take bigger risks and bigger stretches over time as you gain confidence. Your teammates help you with that. Your coaches help you with that. You, as your own third person, help you with that. But something that I definitely learned to hone over time is that you need to pick, especially in the moment, in the race, the most simple conversation possible. Make it one syllable words, possibly make it two. It really depends on the rhythm of what you're doing. In rowing, it's kind of there's a 2 words worked simply because of the rhythm. But you want to have as little space between what you're saying to yourself in your head as possible, because in those spaces is where the other little guy trying to say no will take the opportunity to jump in there and drop a no. So for me, by the time the Olympics rolled around, it was just yes, more. That was it. Because, you'll notice that yes and more as a combination is positive. It's forward thinking. It's I'm taking another step. Individually, yes and more are also positive. They're additive things. So I learned that because that's just the psychology of the brain. When you're under stress, if you break them apart, your brain is only going to latch on to one word at a time, or it's not going to latch on to the contractions, things like that. So there was actually an incident where, and this taught me the most about this, is an incident where I entered a race saying to myself, I'm going to say no fear. No fear is going to be these are going to be my 2 words. This is the best thing ever. It's going to be so empowering. Like, I'm strong. Let's go do this. And that was my risk. That was the risk that I wanted to take, was I'm going to find more. So no fear. And you can already hear the negative kind of tone in there. About 45 seconds into this race, this was a race in Switzerland, a World Cup in Switzerland, that I entered thinking this. And going down the race course, all of a sudden, about 45 seconds into the race, my brain broke the 2 words in half until all I thought was no, fear, no, fear. Every stroke down the race course from there forward. But I had already convinced myself that was what I was going to think. So I had no choice in the moment but to stay latched onto that. And by the time I crossed to the finish line, it felt like, oh my gosh, awful. It was awful. We hadn't gone any faster necessarily, but I felt far worse because of what my brain thought the whole way down the race course. I never said no fear again for a race after that. I realized the error of my ways.
So intriguing, trying to unearth these little things that go on in the athlete's mind that gives them an added push. And I totally agree, because it is that 1 versus 2 that are trying to guide you and have a constant battle within themselves. And that's something that I read in a book called The Intrinsic of Tennis, where the author talks about self 1 and self 2. He argues that self 2 already knows what it needs to do to achieve the task at hand. The whole challenge is to keep self 1 from interfering and giving too many instructions.
Yeah. And that really is, you got to keep it simple. I always say, like, to all the athletes that I get to work with is on race day, you go with what you got. You've practiced the motions, you've practiced the skills, you've practiced all those things so much. It's that one moment is not the time to question all of that. You have spent so much time preparing that the patterns are all there. And so on race day, your job is to distract your mind with the 2 positive words and let the body do what it's spent all that time practicing. On race day, you go with what you got.
Right. And I saw your medal ceremony and you wouldn't stop crying. And I can imagine why. I don't get to ask this often, but what was going through your mind when the Olympic gold medal was being put around your neck?
Because of where I sat in the boat, and I get to write it. I'm not gonna do a total spoiler for you, because I tell a little bit about it in the book as well. But because of where I sat in the boat, being the second smallest, or the smallest person who rowed my side, the second smallest in the boat itself, I was the second to last person to get my medal. So I had watched all my teammates ahead of me get their medals, and I was smiling and clapping and so excited for them. And all of a sudden, the woman is standing right in front of me, and it's my turn. And I was smiling and yay, and then she starts speaking to me. And when she started speaking and she, puts the medal over my head, because at the games, they give you the medal first. That's an idiosyncrasy of the games specifically. They don't shake your hand, then give you the medal. It's the medal, then they shake your hand. I'm not sure why. This woman isn't necessarily sure why either. Possibly a convention of giving you the medal as soon as possible. But as soon as she put it over my head, I wasn't expecting how heavy it was. And when it hit me and hung so much more largely than any of the other medals that we had gotten in the past, it struck me as, oh, this is different. That's how different this is. It was shocking. I had put myself into pain to race before. That I was used to. But the ceremony was so strikingly different that I couldn't have prepared for that. And so when she was shaking my hand and speaking to me, she told me that my life was forever changed. And of course, I couldn't understand in the moment what that meant either, because it's different for everyone. It's still developing, it's still adapting, it's still evolving. But I started bawling when she started shaking my hand. The woman that gave us our medals, is, a pioneer in women's Olympic rowing. And she's the type of person, the best way I can describe this is, if you were to watch her walk across a room, it would almost seem like she's floating. She's like this ethereal presence that you just have a reverence for and a respect. It's just inborn to her. She's soft-spoken, just a really incredible person. And so for someone like that to tell you that your life has changed and to consider you a superhero, to have done this amazing thing, just makes you go, wow, does she know who she is? And she thinks this of me. And that alone is awe-inspiring and interesting. The other piece of it is that rowing was one of the 3 sports in that Olympic year to have the medal ceremony happen immediate relative to the final itself. So we didn't get to go home and take a nap, take a shower. We're standing there still sweating. And so the emotion was completely raw. No time to go, what's my acceptance speech?
Yeah, I'm sure, I think. And having gone through that and then not letting that win getting you in the mindset of resting on your laurels, you went and had another gold medal at the World Championships in 2009. What does it take to constantly motivate yourself in spite of achieving the success that you did?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because that's book number 2. I just haven't gotten to it yet, because the first one ends after the games. But it was really a strange experience, because that again is something that you cannot expect. When we crossed the finish line in 2009, we won again, and we weren't as fit. The boat was not nearly as stable. It wasn't nearly as cohesive as it was the previous year. And so when we crossed the line, I just remember being more wiped than ever. I didn't even have the energy to muster to cheer for this thing. And it was not the same as what I had expected. It wasn't even, additive as I had expected, as it had been in the past. It was almost like, whoa, that was weird. That wasn't as interesting as I thought it was going to be. And that's a strange thing to say. I mean, you just won the World Championships, and that is the beauty of the book that I have yet to write. And so the fact of wrapping my head around what your other outlets are for expressing your best version of you, and rowing, you have a finite amount of time. And it was that I didn't need rowing anymore. Rowing itself was the thing that was teaching me that really what I was enjoying was becoming better and growing and being healthy and happy. And so to come to that point of going back again was because that was the thing that had shown me how to get better every day. And then having that psychological change, made me go, okay, now what can I do? What allows me to get better every day? And so, ultimately I ended up retiring in 2010. And I remember sitting down with my coaches on the very day that I retired. And it was, something isn't right. This isn't the right thing for me anymore. And there was more to it. I was overtraining at the time, honestly. So a lot of the things that has informed the way that I coach and the way that I behave to this day is, you've asked about sustainability, and the recovery piece is critical. And as you get older, it becomes even more critical. And you have to really look at, and this is where tracking comes in again, you have to really look at what is essential to allowing you to excel as you grow and change. And the older we get, you need to prioritize recovery. And there's obviously a finite amount of time in a given day. So you have to go, okay, what can I reduce in order to prioritize this? Because this is more important now than ever. It's always been important, but I need to dedicate even more time to it now. And that is a huge piece of the longevity factor. And that I preach all day long with people that I get to work with at all levels.
Right. And like you mentioned, in 2010 is when you retired. And we often hear stories of a lot of athletes finding the transition from sports to corporate life or any other initiatives difficult because they're not able to the chance of getting that adrenaline or being in that competitive state where they are trying to chase after a result. And knowing that you were driven by the fact that you always wanted to be a better version of yourself, what other avenues were you looking at to improve yourself?
Yeah, that's a mindset shift too, because I struggled with that initially. There are lots of things that I've always wanted to do. And it's very easy to speak in hindsight, right? Oh, you 27-year-old is that, there were things that I had wanted to do because I did start rowing so late. There were other things on my list of life plans that were interesting to me, particularly when you're willing to step into something new that you aren't experienced with. You're starting as a novice again. That alone is scary. So it's day one of practice trying to run away all over again. But being a little older and more experienced, you have the confidence to go, okay, I have been able to improve before, so even though I try this new thing, what are the things that I can do every day to get as good at it as I possibly can? And keeping that mindset, keeping that perspective that it's about getting a little better every day, and that you're not you're aware of other people, you're aware of the standards they're setting, but you're not constantly comparing yourself to them. You're comparing yourself to yourself. Am I getting better? What am I doing to get better? And the better you want to get at something, the more that you're willing to put the resources into that to help you improve. A lot of times we get distracted, or we do something for a period of time and get frustrated because the result isn't what we thought it would be within this timeline. Well, you can't control the timeline. You can only control what you're doing and hope you improve as much as you possibly can in that period of time. And to go back to your question about sitting on the start line, if you think about it, you go, have I done everything I can until this point to be as good as I can? And if the answer is yes, then there's no doubt, and there's no, you can't harbor bad feelings for yourself no matter the result, because you did everything you could up till then. For me, immediately after my retirement from racing, it was ocean rescue. That was something I had wanted to do since I was a kid. And it was funny because I thought my first step was, why would they hire me? I've never done this before. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I thought, oh, right, that's how rowing was. I had never done it before, and yet that's what happened. And so that experience alone has informed whenever I take on something new. It's like, okay, I might not have done this before. I might be however old I am picking it up, but that doesn't mean I can't get better than I was yesterday at it. And that's literally the one question, and the one thing that I ask of myself is, how much am I willing to put into this? How good do I want to be at this? Right? And that's where it all starts. The more that you want to become better at that thing, you'll be willing to pour in more resources, and you'll be willing to eliminate the extraneous. Because at the end of the day, there's a finite amount of time, and there are a finite amount of things you can do. So that's the more focused, the more you want something, the more focused. It's the devil wears Prada thing. This is what's important, and this is what I'm going to focus my time on.
And since retiring, like you mentioned, you've been doing multiple things that you always wanted to do. So you got into coaching, you became a public speaker, and you recently launched the book that we have been talking about briefly, Better Great Than Never, a book that has in fact been 7 years in the making. Tell me a little bit about the book and your aspirations behind writing this one.
Yeah. You know, now that I do the math, it's been a little more than 7 years in the making. But the story, and I'm working on, this morning just brain dumped into my phone a voice memo of like, why the book? And I've wanted to write a book forever. I've been a storyteller since my dad would say at age 2, I started talking. I didn't say a word until age 2. And then at age 2, I started speaking in full sentences and full details. And that's just part of who I am. Both of my parents talk a lot. We give all the details. And that's the beauty of a book, is you can give all the details because it builds the sensory experience for the reader. And 6th grade was the first time I got picked on about writing a book for telling my stories. And then right around my senior-ish year, nope, not senior year, because the journal entries that are in the book itself were kind of the initial writings of the book. So 20 years ago now, I started writing in a journal in red pen, just stories, as kind of like what would it be like to write a book? I'm going to write it in red pen. And this is going to be the book. That was what I thought at the time. And so that went on for the whole time I trained. And then right around maybe 2010, right after I retired again, it turned into, that was the journaling. So I started journaling. My whole life I've journaled. I'll back up here. So my whole life I've journaled for one reason or another, and then started doing it on my own volition when I was about 18. And then, periodically throughout the whole time that I wrote, which helped build the story. And that's what you see. There are journal entries in the entire story. So you get those elements of what I actually thought in the moment. And then from there, it evolved. It went from red pen to black pen to new journals to typing it. I typed more than 115 or so pages on 2 occasions. So hundreds of pages that I've written, typed, all that. And then right about a little over a year ago, got with a company that taught me the key elements of, okay, let's really be serious about writing this story and do it right. And they taught me the key critical elements, and I took it away from there. So yeah, it's been like a lifetime of living it and wanting to write it, and about 8 years of talking about it and 1 year of doing it the right way.
Right. And how has the response been so far, and what is the future looking like for you with this book? And also, like you briefly mentioned, the second book that is in the making.
Yeah. This book is, people are loving it so far, which is amazing. When I started public speaking, people would say, do you have a book? This is such an interesting story. This is such an incredible, inspiring story, a weird story, a unique story. And I didn't have a book at the time. So that's been a dozen years of people asking for it, which built my confidence to think maybe there was something here. But lo and behold, in the words of my brother, who, of course, big brother doesn't want to tell little sister that she's done a good job, right? It's just how it works. For those of us that have siblings. He said, Lindsay, I was expecting good or maybe great, because that's, what you do. He said, what I wasn't expecting was fantastic. And strangers have told me that this story needs to be read. People need this story. It's an inspiring story. It's a story that people that I know are like, man, it makes me think about this, or man, it makes me want to do this. And that's what I was hoping, is that it would take that 17-year-old me that was insecure and go, that's possible. You know what? Something great is possible. Something great is within every single one of us out there. It's just a matter of finding our outlet at the time. For a lot of people, it's a sport for a period of time. And then after that, it's a matter of finding the next thing that you choose. We have lots of options. There are lots of options. Pick the thing and stick to it, if that allows you to become better every day. But to specifically answer your question about what the book, people are really enjoying it. People are offering to help get it out there, because it's just me, and I love the idea of paying it forward. Read it, share it with 2 friends, and ask them to do the same. It shows the power of teamwork. It shows the power of connection. It shows the importance of the small moments in life that really make our lives significant. hopefully it allows me to write another book. I shouldn't say hopefully. Yes, I will write another book. It just is a matter of time and being able to afford to do so. But the really cool thing is that it's not just the story itself that's interesting. People have said that they enjoy the writing, that apparently the actual story is readable and well written, which is an insanely amazing compliment that I never would have expected. It was a lot of work. I spent a lot of hours hunched over typing, waking up in the middle of the night to write things because you can't get them out of your head. And it's exhausting. But I never imagined that someone would have said, "Oh my gosh, you're a brilliant storyteller."
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. And like I'd mentioned, I'm only two chapters deep in the book, but it does keep me hooked on, wanting to read the book even further. Whenever I'm not doing it, I'm thinking about doing it. So I totally resonate with that. And like you mentioned, the book is about inspiring more people to take action. And that is also very true in the team of the 8 that won the gold medal in Beijing, where you mentioned a majority of them actually picked up rowing late into their career, which is, say, 20s. And that is pretty late given the standard norm in rowing, which is a specialized sport. And we see people starting rowing at 5, at 6. And this is a true testament to sticking out for your team, and showing up does bear the right result.
Yeah, and being open to new possibilities. There was the night before I bumped into the rowing coach back in college when I was 20 years old, one of the things I said, had it not been too late for me. And so it is never too late to make the decision to become better. If you aren't appreciating the path that you're currently on, make some sort of decision and change just one thing, even if that means just sleep 5 minutes more. Make a small change that will allow you to build up so that you can become a little better every single day, and pay attention to what helps.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you at the podcast today and learning these really interesting traits that make an athlete, an elite athlete, and allow them to have a sustained period of success. And I definitely learned a lot from this conversation. I'm really looking forward to reading the book even more. So thank you once again for taking out the time today and sharing your story with us, Lindsay.
Of course. And maybe next time we can delve more into next book, whatever that happens to be. the what happens next. This has been fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you. Wow. That was an action-packed conversation with an Olympic and world champion. Lindsay generously shared such amazing insights into what goes on in her mind and what sort of interactions she is having with herself while she's performing. I'm definitely stealing Lindsay's habits of having positive interaction with oneself while performing, and also the habit of journaling as an athlete. And I hope aspiring athletes from our listener base also do the same. To know more about Lindsay's journey, check out her book Better Great Than Never at bettergreatthanneverbook.com. So that's it for this episode, folks. Thank you for tuning into the Gifted Podcast. I have been your host, Niraj Mulani. A gentle reminder, you can find us as The Gifted on your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and Google. Keep following us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Gifted Podcast, and on Twitter as The Gifted Pod, so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Thank you once again for listening, and I'll see you next week with another special episode. Until then, stay well and keep your masks on.